Hello and welcome to Two Car Pros. I'm Ryan, and today we're going to be going over the top 7 reasons why your car might be giving you an intermittent misfire. An intermittent misfire is when you're under heavy throttle or partial throttle and the car feels like it's chugging. That right there is a misfire. Now there's a lot of different things that can cause that issue, but this is the 7 most frequent ones that I've seen in my career. So let's jump into the first one. But before we jump into the first one, we gotta go over the first thing, which is to scan your vehicle using an OBD2 scanner. These scanners are available pretty much everywhere. I have a link up here on the card to a great video on how to scan your OBD2 vehicle, and there's a link down below in the description, just in case you missed the card. And these scanners are available anywhere for about $20. This will give you a good indication on what cylinder could be your issue, or even what side of the engine it could be, or it will give you a code and tell you exactly what your problem is. Scanning your vehicle is the easiest and fastest way to see what is wrong or what could be wrong with your vehicle, and it might even give you tips on how to fix it. Now, the first physical problem that usually goes wrong, and this one's a weird one, is a cracked plug. So cracks can appear in the porcelain. They can even be brand new. I just changed the plugs in my truck, and cylinder number 8 was misfiring. You'll hear me reference this quite a few times throughout this video. And what the issue ended up being was the plug, which was brand new. I just bought a brand new Ford Motorcraft plug and put it in. It had a very small, almost not even noticeable hairline crack in it. And what that does is allow the spark to escape through the porcelain out to where it doesn't need to go. The spark doesn't actually end up going into the combustion chamber all the time, so it creates that misfire. Also, while we're talking about spark plugs, when's the last time you changed your spark plugs? Old spark plugs, or ones that aren't firing or taking too much energy to push the spark through due to age, can also cause a misfire. So if you've just replaced your plugs and it's still misfiring, you might want to take them out and check them like we're going to do right here. Okay, so we have our spark plug out of the vehicle here, and we're going to take a very close look at it and examine it in general. See if the plug is misgapped maybe, or if it's got some carbon fouling on it, or if it's just plain old like this one is. This has been in the vehicle for quite some time. But if your plug is new, obviously if a plug's old you can replace it, but if your problem persists and your plug is new, what you want to do is, I recommend gloves for this part too, because porcelain is glass and glass is sharp, and gingerly run your fingers around it like this, and try to feel a seam. The smallest seam can let spark out even if the plug is brand new. And if it's letting spark out, an intermittent misfire can absolutely happen. So you're basically looking for what's called a cracked plug. And if you find a cracked plug, there is no way to repair it. You just need to replace it. Number 2 on my list is related to the spark plug. Your ignition coils could be bad. I just had this problem where I replaced all 8 of my ignition coils in my Ford pickup, and I was having a little bit of an intermittent misfire. Like I said, on 8 for the spark plugs, but the coil is always something you want to suspect. So the coil can go bad just because it is something that heats up and cools down all the time, and it's just a primary coil and a secondary coil inside of it, and that cannot work properly, especially if you've ran them for a long time, because if you have a bad plug or an old plug, it takes a lot more energy. The coil has to fire to get the plug in, or the spark through the plug into the combustion chamber. So that can take a toll on your ignition coils. So the next thing you should suspect is ignition coils. How old are they? Are they as old as the vehicle? It might be time for a replacement. So this is a plug wire. This is a little bit older of a plug wire, obviously. Even the new stuff, a lot of new stuff like the GM series, the LS series engines, they have a coil pack and then they have a wire leading down into the plug like this, but this attaches to a coil pack, and that coil pack can go bad, or it can be bad from the factory. Even new ones can be bad. It does happen. So you need to replace that if you suspect that. There is ways to test them, but they are often unreliable. The best thing you can do is replace the coil wire and the coil pack, even if it's new. They can be dead from the factory. The third one is another part to the combustion equation. It is your fuel injector. How old are they? Are they original and bespoke to the vehicle? Is that something you want to test? I have a link down below in the description on how to test a fuel injector. But if I'm honest, it's much easier to just replace them. So I had this same issue again on cylinder number 8 on my Ford pickup. So I just went ahead and replaced all the fuel injectors with brand new Motorcraft ones, so I knew they weren't the issue. So that one's pretty straightforward. If you suspect a fuel injector could be your issue, if you've already done the plug, you've already done the coil, the next thing you should suspect is your fuel injector. Number 4 is going to be a fuel delivery issue. I'm gonna tie fuel pump and fuel filter together, because if your fuel filter is really plugged, that can also cause an intermittent misfire. But usually a fuel pump will become weak over time, or it just flat out won't work. That can also cause that, because if your fuel pump isn't putting enough pressure into the line when your fuel injector opens, it won't squirt enough fuel in, it won't burn correctly, it will develop a misfire. So the next thing you need to suspect is a weak fuel pump, and that's a really easy test. What you're looking at there, this right here, that's your gas tank on a 2005 F-150, and your gas tank will be very easy to locate. Wherever you fill your car, you know, your gas fill port, it's gonna be somewhere near that, and you can follow the line down to underneath it. It'll look like a tank, like this does. It holds gasoline. So most of the time on modern vehicles, the fuel pump is actually located inside of the fuel tank. So what we can do to see if it's running or not is turn the key to the second position. Do not turn the vehicle on. Just turn the key to the second position and see if the fuel pump makes any kind of noise. It should sound like a little whining sound, and if it sounds really droning, like means the fuel pump is dying or not supplying enough fuel pressure. So let's try it. So that strong squeaking sound right there is a good indicator that the fuel pump is working correctly. And if you didn't get that strong squeaking sound, then you might want to look into replacing your fuel pump. Okay, what you're looking at now is a fuel filter. This is on an older vehicle, so they have these little clear ones, as opposed to the more modern ones that are made of metal and can handle the kind of PSI that a fuel injection system requires, but they work off the same way. It just has a paper filter material, which you can clearly see. Now, if that paper filter material becomes clogged and it only lets little bits of gas through at a time, you can get an intermittent misfire, so changing your fuel filter regularly is important. Number 5 is a dirty throttle body. So the throttle body is a plate that regulates how much airflow is coming into the engine. It's a throttle body. And your air filter can't actually remove all the impurities that are in the air around us. So those impurities have a tendency to develop on the throttle plate, and if it's electronically controlled, it has a sensor to determine where that is. Now, if there's enough dirt on it, that sensor gets confused and it doesn't really know what it's doing. It can also throw a random check engine light, but it can cause an intermittent misfire, especially under heavy throttle. So what do? You take it off, you clean it, and put it back together. It's very simple. I have a ton of videos on them. Links down below in the description if you are more interested. Number 6 is related to number 5. A bad mass airflow sensor or a bad MAP sensor can cause an intermittent misfire. And again, this is due to impurities in the air, so those sensors could need a replacement. They're usually fairly easy and worth about 2 screws or 2 bolts and a plug. They're usually pretty easy to replace. I just did that in my F-150, actually trying to chase down my intermittent misfire. So it was a nice thing to get out of the equation as one of the more popular things that goes wrong, because you have 140,000 miles worth of air going past this little sensor and enough buildup comes on it. There's nothing you can do. You can replace it. There are people that say you can clean them, but in my opinion, you're better off just replacing it. And then you have a brand new mass airflow sensor or a MAP sensor. What's wrong with that? Number 7 on our list of most common intermittent misfire causers is a vacuum leak. Now, your engine relies on vacuum to do many different things in your vehicle, so vacuum lines can run throughout your vehicle. If one of those vacuum lines they're usually made of rubber, it becomes corroded or cracks or develops even a pinhole leak, that can cause issues. So here's a great video up here in the card that will show you exactly how to track down a vacuum leak, because your engine's pulling all this air, so there is a pressure negative inside of the intake manifold, and that vacuum is used to do a bunch of different things. So if there is air getting into the engine that it hasn't accounted for with all its sensors and different things, your engine can cause a misfire because it doesn't know what to do with that extra air. It can be a real issue. So a vacuum leak is something that needs to be tracked down and fixed immediately. So that is 7 of the most popular things that go wrong in your vehicle when you're experiencing an intermittent misfire. This is one of the more pain in the neck things and things that are frustrating when you have a modern vehicle that is doing an intermittent misfire, because this is something that doesn't really happen all the time. It's something that maybe you can replicate or maybe you can't. It's kind of comes and goes. It's one of those things. So doing these 7 things I have recommended will definitely narrow down your problem, if not eliminate it completely. Like I said throughout this video, I recently had to do this on my F-150, and I thought it would make an interesting video because I had to go through these lists myself. And if you are curious, what was the problem on my F-150 was in fact a cracked plug. And yes, it was the last thing I checked because the plugs were brand new. All applicable links are located down below in the description. If this video helped you at all, if you could give it a big thumbs up, that would be an enormous help to me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.